Hi there, I'm Cindy Pope and I'm here in the Cool Tools studio to show you how to make a very easy wraparound ring from FS999 or EZ960. Today I'm using EZ960 and you're going to be amazed at the way this works. So here are the rings we're going to make. I've used some of Cool Tools fine line textures, and these are texture mats that have a nice line where it's really easy to cut for a ring, and so the texture will not go all the way up to the edge and it'll look really clean. The one I'm going to use, I'm going to show you, it's got little figurines and lines where we'll be cutting. And I'm going to give you 5 more that I found that are really going to work wonderful for this ring. You can also make it plain, you don't need to add texture, or you can also make one on the Curio, which I made this one. So you're going to need ring sizers and ring mandrels, and you'll need water and oil, a ruler, a brush, tweezers, and a tissue blade. To roll the clay, you need rolling frames, and we're using the smaller ones for this project, and you need a silicone mat, 2 little applicator brushes to join our piece together, a microfine sponge, EZ960, and a roller, and I'm going to be using one of Cool Tools white tiles, and their 2mm biopsy punch, which is a great hole punch, and then a little bit of saran wrap. I also am going to use this little tiny Princeton application brush, and we need a bit of thick paper. I'm going to have some containers to put slip in, and then we're going to use a heating surface. Okay, we are ready to get started making our ring, and the first thing we need to do is figure out what size we want it to be. What you need for that is you need to use a ring sizer. I want to show you one thing about this particular ring sizer. We are doing a wide band ring. This is the ring we're going to be making. So when you measure your ring size, do not go all the way down to the knuckle. You want to go up a little bit, and you want to go up about a half a size, because this type of ring you do not want to fit as tight as a very thin ring. So we're going to go and make a size 9 ring. So for EZ960, I think you need to go up about 2 sizes. So I'm going to take a size 11 mandrel, and I'm going to take a nice thick piece of paper. This piece of paper is about 4 cards thick, and that's our final thickness we want to get to. So about 1 millimeter. This is really thick, fine art paper. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take it and wrap it around the mandrel. This is not the type of ring that's going to meet. So I want to go over at least ½ an inch, about 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to cut. So it's not an exact measurement and doesn't really need to be. So now I've got the length of clay that I need to use. EZ960 doesn't shrink a lot while it's drying, so it may shrink 2 millimeters. So now we're ready to go ahead and roll our clay. I'm going to start with a rolling frame of 5, and then we're going to go down to a 4 when we add the texture. I'm going to open up 25 grams of EZ960, and that'll be more than enough for this ring. You probably could make 2 rings from this much. I'm going to take it out, and I'm just going to work it a little bit. Got a beautiful texture, so I'm really not going to need to condition it at all. This is long and thin, so our starting shape should be long and thin. We need a little bit of oil on the mat. I never spray my oil straight on the mat. I want to not oversaturate the clay with oil. But I'm using enough because I'm going to have to pick this up and put it on the drying surface, so I'm using enough so I'll be able to do that. We're going to need a nonstick roller, and I'm using the large nonstick roller from Cool Tools. And we're taking our clay and we're putting it in about the shape we want to roll. And I'm going to roll it down 5 cards. And I'm going to roll both directions because I think it's good for the clay. It dries a little more consistently. Then I'm going to take the piece I just made and make sure that this clay is thick enough for that, which it is. I'm going to put the texture on first and then I'm going to cut it. So let's roll one more time. And then I'm going to take my texture mat and I'm going to actually oil this up a little bit. Again, you don't want to saturate it with oil. So at this time I'm going to actually put a little bit on the work surface. And you don't really need to oil the whole thing. I oil about 2 or 3 of the strips. And if you would see it puddling at all, you'd want to get a paper towel and get it up. So I'm going to put, I'm going to roll it down to a 4. So I'm going to take the 4 mat, I'm going to put it on top of this textures. They fit really, really nicely. And I'm going to put it down so I get at least one of those strips. And then I press it in. This is a deep texture and I want that depth when I roll it. So I'm going to press it in. Then I'm going to turn it sideways. And I'm going to roll half one way and half the other way. I'm going to take the frame off, turn it upside down. If you pull this away from the texture, you're not going to distort it as much. And I think it really turned out well. So now what I'm going to do, you want these figurines to stand up as much as possible. And EZ960 takes a texture really, really well. So this texture actually comes with lines that I can use to cut the ring. So I'm just going to cut on those lines. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we can sand it a little bit afterwards. And this is the point at which I want to use my measurement, and I'm going to measure the length of this ring. We're going to take the extra clay and we're going to wrap it. And then before I actually measure it, I want to straighten it out using the ruler or the tissue blade. Then I'm going to take and put this up to it. And I want to pick the end of the ring I'm not too concerned about, but the part that's going to fold over right here, I want to make sure it's a figure that I like. So I have a little bit of room to choose which figure I want to use. And I think I'm going to go right here. And then I'll have some room to sand. And right here. You want to put this away. Okay, now that we've got it cut, I'm going to gently pick it up. And I'm going to put it on the heating surface. I want to make sure it's straight. So we're going to let that heat and then we're going to construct the ring. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to make faux rivets, little dots like these that are wonderful accents for any piece. We're going to roll some clay at 3 cards. We want to oil the surface really, really well because we don't want it to stick. Now I'm going to make 2mm faux rivets, but you can really make them any size. And I have them made in all different sizes for different projects. We always want to store our clay, we don't want to leave it out. So it's really nice for the next project. So at this point, we're going to take and put saran wrap over the top. You want to make sure it's nice and flat. We're going to take our little biopsy punch And we're going to punch it down all the way through the clay. And this one's actually 3 millimeters. We're making 3 millimeter punches. And you can make as many as you want. I've got a bunch pre-made, so we're going to go ahead and stop here. And then you pull it up, and as you pull it up, some are going to stay on the surface and some are not. For any that are not staying on the surface, you can just go behind and just poke them through and they'll fall right off. We're going to do what we're going to do at this point. We're just going to take this and put it on a heating surface. They dry really, really quickly. We're going to add them to the ring dry. Okay, now our piece is dry, and what I'm going to do at this point is it's fairly flexible, but I'm going to show you what you do to make it more flexible so to be able to go all the way around a mandrel. You sand it in a circular motion, and what this does is it's like loosening up the clay so it'll bend. You can see a few people through there, but what I'm going to do at this point also is I'm going to take it up to the edge and I'm going to sand it on the sides. This is going to give it a comfort fit. Much easier to do it now than until after we bend it. I'm not pressing too hard because I don't want to damage that texture, but the EZ960 clay is pretty strong at this point. Flexible but strong, which is a good combination. So I've just rounded that up a little bit. I don't like my rings with really sharp edges. When you do the front side, you want to be very careful not to mess up your texture. So I'm actually curving it like this. Most comfort fit rings are more curved on the inside. We're going to do the other side. And doing it along the edge just makes it a lot easier. We're going to flip her around and do the same thing on this side. I'm going to sand it a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of test it to see if it feels flexible enough. And now it's much more flexible. But we're not going to bend it really fast. The other thing I want to do is I want to choose which side I like the best. And I'm going to make this a little curved. You can see with this ring, I just curved the ends a little bit, and I think it looks nice. You could really do any kind of shape at the end you want. Okay, so we've sanded it up and it's nice and rounded. And now what we're going to do is we're going to join these together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand the end on both sides so it's kind of like a little joint. And so it won't be as fat in the center. On the front one, you always want to sand on the back. I do this also on the edge because I feel like it's a little bit easier. And so what I want to do is I want to have it thicker at the inside and thinner at the end. It'll make it a lot easier to construct. And then I look at it and say, is that thin enough? Not quite. You don't want it to get too thin because obviously you don't want it to break. On the other side, we're going to sand this end. Because it's going to fold over, we really don't want this final person there. We're going to have to erase them because it'll be hard to construct with that bump. And this is a nice grit for doing this with greenware clay. And so I've sanded that one down. Also, I'm going to go a little bit further. Now we're ready to join it. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit, make sure it's nice and flexible. Then I'm going to take that size 11 mandrel and we're going to wrap it around. But I want you to do it very slowly, and we're going to use a certain methodology in bending it because this is fairly thick and you don't want it to break. If you do break it, you can totally make a nice little cartouche necklace out of it. I did have one break. So what we're doing is we are kind of encouraging a curve. We're not curving it all the way around. We're just starting the piece curving. And so it's almost like we're going halfway into the curve. So this one's going to be on the back. So I'm going to start to curve it a little bit more, but again, I'm not going to go all the way. It's almost like you have to do it 2 or 3 times. You're getting to that final curve in steps. And you can see now it's getting nice and flexible. So I want the part that's going to be on the bottom, on the very edge, and I'm going to go about halfway and I'm going to hold it there for a minute. And it'll just, it's like it's a rubber band, it's like it gets used to that particular bend and it's going to stay there. And then I'm going to bend this one over. I'm going to hold it for a minute to make sure that bend is really good. And we have a beautiful texture. We have not ruined the texture in adding the ring. It's really, really nice. I do have another person underneath, and it's when you add something on top of a texture, it's harder to do the join. So I'm going to sand this little person off real quickly, carefully. It's amazing what depth you get on this particular texture. And it's a relief, so how much it stands up. And I'm a fan of relief textures. I think something that stands up has more of a perceived value, or people are drawn to it. So these particular textures, these relief textures, are really, really nice. So once I've got that done, we're going to go ahead and take some slip, and we're going to join it together, and it's an easy join. I'm going to take a little water. Now, if your sandings are not quite enough, you can take slip or paste. There's EZ960 paste, and you can add a little bit more. What I do is I use this and then I dry it and put it back in. When you're using this, there's no imperfections in it because we're just wetting it. So I'm going to make it a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to wet both sides, and I'm going to wet them by swirling. I don't know if you can see that. And as I swirl, I'm picking up slip. I'm going to do the back side also. I'm going to support it underneath because, again, it could break. It's probably not going to at this point. And as soon as you've got that done, you're going to press it down, and you're going to hold it for about a minute. And as soon as you're done holding it for about a minute and you think it's pretty well done, you're going to put it on the heating surface and hold it with the join down. And just give the clay a little bit of time to dry and join together, and then you can let it completely dry, and then we'll refine the edges and the inside. So we're going to take our ring off the heating surface. We're going to take it off the mandrel. I'm going to take a look at it and see how it's doing and where I need to join it. And I need to refine so this part is totally closed. It's not likely to open up in the kiln, but you don't want to see a line on the side. You want it to look very, very smooth. The other thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to fill in on the inside. So we've got some slip here, and I'm going to go with more dirty water, and we are just going to take this and rub back and forth. What that's going to do is it's going to wet the top layer of clay and make those two parts join really nicely. Again, like in all my projects, that's refining is done probably 2 or 3 times. You never want to put it in the kiln when it's not really ready, perfect to go. Right here, if there are any gaps at all, I'm going to take what's mostly distilled water, And you don't need clay to do to refine here, to do a join, but you do need water. So I'm just going to take this little Princeton brush and just kind of and I'm just closing up that little gap. I'm not messing with my texture. And if you do see a tiny place where you need to add clay, just add a little bit. Because you don't want to get too messy on the surface, because we have a great texture. We don't want to mess with it. But you want to, at a minimum, run some water along that joint. Now we're going to heat it again, and then we're going to sand and refine, wet refine, and put a little bit more clay on the inside. So we've got our piece joined, and we've done some refining. So once I've done refining and it's totally dry, I'm going to sand that edge. And again, we're not going to put it in the kiln until it looks totally smooth, and we're pretty close there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a ring file, and we are going to sand the inside here. I have added some clay, but I'm going to sand it a little bit, and I probably will add some more. And since we've got double thickness here, we've got some room to sand. This is a nice file that's going to give you a beautiful smooth inside. Okay, now that we've smoothed the inside and refined the outside, and we've made sure it's joined very nicely up at the top, we're going to add these little dots. And I have a whole container full of them, as you can see, and I just make them and use them in projects as I need them. You have to self-edit. You can put too many dots on something. I know that's hard to imagine. So what I do is I put them on the piece, and I figure out where I want them to go. And a lot of times I'll put them right on the edge here, or I'll put two there. But I think this one I'm going to put right there. So let me show you how I join these. They are completely dry, and we're going to use a little bit of water with a little bit of clay in it, and we're going to use our teeny tiny brush and mix that up nicely. I'm going to take a tweezer, because for me these are a little too small to pick up with my hands. And then it's almost like a little puddle. And what I'm doing is I'm smushing it around, and I'm rehydrating the surface. And it doesn't rehydrate the whole thing. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this water, and I'm going to put it right where I'm going to add that piece of clay. So you want a little puddle on the surface of the piece. Then I'm going to take tweezers, and I'm going to roll it back and forth a little bit. Then you're going to put it right on the piece, and you're going to move it back and forth, because that'll make it smush and join into it. And then if you get too much water, you can actually take a paper towel and dry it. And then we're going to put this on the drying surface, and this also needs to be reinforced. If on this particular piece in particular, these dots, if you don't reinforce them, they will come out. And I polish my stuff very, very vigorously, so you want to be sure that you have refined it at least 1 or 2 times. But I'm going to take a little paper towel. I don't want that water sitting on the surface of the texture, so I'm just taking that extra bit out. We're going to dry it, refine it, make sure the inside looks great, and then we're going to fire it in the kiln at 1675 for 2 hours. Now our piece is fired and finished, and I added Black Max patina, and I used this flash shiner, which is great for the top because I don't want to take any of the texture off at all. And what it does is it gives you a little bit of sanding, and then the other side gives it a bright, shiny finish. And you can get into the little bits, and it's a really nice finishing tool. And there we go. I hope you enjoy making it.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.